The Next Shelter Network presents an Appalachian Trail interview series, 2024 edition. This is a platform for hikers to share their hearts, minds, and experiences. These interviews are hosted by yours truly, Trevor Hendry, otherwise known as Bear. Now to the interview. We are live here. We are with Tara Dower. Is that how you say it?
Graham?
Great. Oh my gosh. Tara Graham. I'm sorry. I
It's
looked it
okay.
up
You were
before I talked
close.
with you and I still butchered it. And you are going to be starting in mid-March, right? Is that correct? Or early March?
Early March.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's coming up here in another month. So it's
I
starting to
know.
it's going to be crunch time here. First, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day, out of your life. I mean, it seems like from our conversations prior, you've got a lot going on. It seems like you're on the move a lot, but you're also preparing for a through hike, which is a massive life altering event. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for you, and like I said, I'm happy you could join me. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. What's the process been like for you getting ready for this hike?
It's been a long process, actually. I decided to do a through hike about 8 years ago. The year prior, my brother hiked in 2015, and he came home with stories, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so I put that in my calendar, penciled it in for 8 years later, because at the time, my kids were still living at home. And so I needed to wait until both my son and my daughter were out of the house. And that happened last spring when my son graduated from high school. And so that's the big picture of the plan. But I guess the little pieces and parts that go with that are just my love of hiking and backpacking. So the last 4 years specifically, I've really spent most of my free time on trail, whether it's section hiking, backpacking trips. I've traveled in about 21 states in the past 4 years doing hiking and backpacking, and putting my gear together. Although I wrote recently that what works on a backpacking 3 4 5 10 day trip doesn't necessarily work on a through hike. So I'm starting to work on finalizing all of those plans these last few weeks.
Wow. That's a lot there. That's a lot to unpack. 21 states. You've done. I think I recall you telling me you've done what 1,500 miles collectively of trail. Is that right?
I'm averaging about 12 to 1500 miles a year.
A year. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. A
yeah,
year.
so about 100 miles a month.
So how do you because among many things, we had a brief conversation. You told me you're you're an empty nester now, right? You mentioned your kids, they're out of the home.
Yeah.
Um, you're a yogi, a nutritionist. You've kind of had this whole dual life thing going on. You're a city girl, country girl. Like there's so much to unpack, and I don't even know
Where to
where
start?
where to start here. So
Yeah.
so let's just rewind all the way to the beginning.
Okay.
Where are you originally from?
I'm actually originally from rural Pennsylvania. So I grew up on a dairy farm. I was one of five children, the only girl. I was very much a tomboy. And I stayed through high school. And then when I was 17, I left. I had this, I don't know, city girl within the country girl. And so I landed in New York City, worked there for a few years, moved my way up the coast, and spent a good chunk of my young adult life in Connecticut. That's where my kids were born. And then fast forward through those years, my husband died in a car accident in 2016. And so I uprooted. I closed my business, I sold my house, and I moved my kids about 500 miles away from their home back to rural Pennsylvania, where I've been for the last 8 years. Um, with every tragedy and challenge in life comes an opportunity. And with that particular challenge, I had a clean slate. I got the chance to build my life over again. And I just added in the pieces that mattered. So for me, that was being at home with my kids during this time and reestablishing connection with my family, falling in love with all of the things that rural Pennsylvania provided that I couldn't stand as a teenager, but I really appreciate as an adult. And finding a way to have a career that allowed me to be in this limbo transition for 8 years, which meant a lot of online consulting work, a lot of, I teach yoga classes, as you mentioned. I also do nutrition counseling online and in person. I do some lifestyle coaching, and I recently received a certification in mind body therapy. So I do somatic work. And when I come back from the trail, I will be able to dive straight into Thai massage because I've spent the last few months finishing up a certification in Thai massage. So it's kind of putting together all of these parts and pieces that allow me to continue to be kind of nomadic with a tether here in my hometown.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. Yeah, you're the kind of person who I would imagine, and I kind of identify this with myself, is it would be very hard to describe yourself in just with one word, right? Because there's
Yeah.
kind of this duality, this dichotomy to who you are as a person. And where you're talking about those big changes in your life, I kind of think of the word I don't know, catalyst, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a catalyst for change early in your life when you decided to leave Pennsylvania and head for the big city. There's a catalyst for change in your life. With the passing of your husband, with your partner, your husband, and so I want to go back to that original one when you moved from the country to the city. What what was the inspiration behind that? Were you just wanting to get out from that small town that you're living in? What was going on there at that time?
I think so. I think there was definitely a desire to flee the small town mentality, but also there was a pull, kind of a seeking of sorts to find. I felt that there had to be more out there. There had to be more. I was looking to find a part of myself that I hadn't quite identified, and I was an art major, so I went away to school to for art. And when I graduated, I ended up in marketing and design for a few years until I had kids. And in that journey, I found the parts of myself I wasn't able to uncover here in this rural area. And the beauty of it is, after uncovering them, I was able to bring them back here when I
Mhm.
returned.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there a lot of people find themselves on trail for different reasons, right?
Mhm.
Some people are looking to find themselves. Some people um, are just looking for a simple adventure. Other people's are grieving loss, and I'm sure you've had a lot of time to do that in your life.
Yeah.
But that's a big reason why I've talked with a lot of people who are on trail to grieve and process that experience in their life. If you mind talking, and of course we don't have to if you don't want to, but
Sure.
can you talk about that experience from you, kind of grieving the loss and then moving forward for in the changes in your life that would subsequently come?
Sure. Yeah, I'm an open book when it comes to that, because I think that the more we're able to talk about these things together, um, the less intense it is for us individually. And I think that the biggest part of the grief in that particular situation for me was there was a period of time that was kind of frozen. Being a single mom and having this giant responsibility of my children, who were 12 and 14 at the time, and the big change and the move and the everything was different. And so there was a time that it was just, I think, um, I don't even know what I would call it. We were. a state of shock. You know, you think when your body gets injured, you're in this state of you can't really process things. So I definitely fell into that for a period of time. And then as I was able to move through that, and the kids and I developed what was our new normal and found this family of three, um, we were able to share our feelings, experiences, and build a new life together. And I have to say, of course, there's grief in what could be, what could have been, but more so now, I'm just truly grateful for everything that we did have. And I can move forward. I really don't feel like my journey on the AT will be to process grief. I feel like I've done that already. Perhaps, if anything that relates to this subject, I could be a support to others who may be processing that on trail. Maybe. I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that. I'm really not looking to discover myself either. I'm going to be turning 53 in a few days after I get on trail, and I feel like at this time in my life I've made so much progress through that. Yes, I'm looking for the adventure for sure, but I'm also really excited to connect and hear stories from others, to focus on some of my what I would call areas of my life that can be strengthened. I tend to be shy, not necessarily an introvert, but not very socially extroverted. And so I've challenged myself with, rather than hopping into my hammock early on during the night, to sit in the shelters and to have the conversations and really connect with other hikers. um, it will be a challenge for sure, but definitely one that I'm ready to dive into.
That's awesome. So, kind of born out of the grief and the responsibility in your life, because you mentioned that you had children,
Mhm.
you move back from the city to rural Pennsylvania, and I know you mentioned that you were kind of able to appreciate things that maybe you took for granted when you were younger.
Yeah.
What how did you get from there to kind of where you are now in your life? Like, I see all these skill sets that you have. I see all these adventures that and experiences that you've partaken in. And I would imagine that it kind of rose from the ashes of that period in time in your life. So where are you currently located?
Like physically?
Yeah, yeah. Like, where are you living right
Um,
now?
I'm just outside of the Allegheny National Forest. So if you're looking at a map, I'm southeast of Lake Erie
Okay,
and near the Warren area of Pennsylvania.
gotcha. So I guess we can go one by one here.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I'm sure you could talk about these things forever. And a lot of
Oh,
these things are very relevant to things that you're going to experience and process on your trail journey. But for example, your introduction to your yoga practice, how did how
mhm.
did that come about?
It's, and I've heard this before, but yoga just kind of takes over and morphs into you. And in my experience, one day I just was somebody who practiced yoga, and I can't even tell you when it started. I've probably been practicing for about 20 years. I've been teaching for about 15. Um, I think yoga started out for me as a physical practice. Um, I have always been athletic. I've always been into fitness, and so I found it in the clubs, and then it became so much more. And I practice all eight limbs of yoga, and I'm really into the philosophy of it, or the way that we can utilize yoga as life. It just becomes a practice for life. Everything that I practice on the mat, I practice in my life.
So you said you've been practicing yoga for 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
and you've been teaching for 15, right?
Yes.
All the same. So how is I know you mentioned how you interact with others socially.
Hmm.
I think hiking and being on the trail is a medium which allows people who are socially awkward, maybe a little bit introverted. Not, I'm not saying you're socially awkward, but
I
people
am.
who
It's
don't,
okay.
folks who have a little trouble interacting with others. It gives us, it allows us to find each other in this place where we have common ground. Would you say that yoga has been that for you? And I would imagine it definitely has in a way, because you're teaching others as well. What's that been like for you?
Um, to be honest, I would say that the backpacking community is a little bit more open in that area. I think that there's still such a confusion, a misunderstanding about what yoga really is. I mean, there's still the the I need to wear Lululemon and be a certain ethnicity or from a certain class to walk into a yoga studio, and that's so unfortunate. And in my experiences, backpacking, that's not the case. I've heard it said that um, backpacking or hiking or whatever, like, is an age. What's the phrase? Like where everybody becomes the same age, right? It's a nullifier for that.
Mhm,
I don't think that that has trickled into the yoga world just yet. Actually, recently I posted a video on my yoga routine that I do while I am backpacking. And I wanted to mention the fact that, I wasn't in Lululemon, I wasn't in any type of specific, I was in hiking pants and gingies and whatever, but you don't need anything for yoga. And unfortunately, I think that is has not permeated the industry just yet. But I can say that when people do come to a yoga studio and do find that home and do find that community, which is also called a sangha in yoga tradition, that then that opens up for them. Then that is created. And then the community supports the yogi in that way. But it's not everywhere.
mm,
And, it is a wish of mine to see that part of yoga really explode because I think we need it.
mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So let's transition going from
Mhm.
yoga to nutrition, because you
Yeah.
mentioned that that's a passion of yours. It's something that you find an expertise in, and I don't even know where to begin as far as associating nutrition with the Appalachian Trail, because
Yeah.
normally there are these two things that collide, and they're in deep conflict with one another, and we
Yeah.
justify all the junk food that we eat
Mhm.
in favor of saying, "Oh, I did the miles, or I need the
Right.
calories." What, and this is going to tie into what our own expectations are for the trail and this journey
Yeah.
for ourselves, but nutrition is going to play a big part of it for you. So how are you approaching nutrition and the trail?
Yeah. I think that you're right. Um, there is this a black um, emptiness in this industry in this world for nutrition, and I've seen it mentioned in a few different areas. But even people who are talking about bringing nutrition to the trail are still using ultra processed foods and things like that. It's really really hard because of my passion, my interest, and what I do for a living. That
Mm,
has never been an option for me. So I started day one with really bringing whole foods into my backpacking trips. And I've struggled with that over the years, like how in the world am I going to do this on a through hike? But I'm attempting it and we'll see how it goes. So the planning is that I will be resupplying. I will be sending myself boxes. And I know that there's a lot of argument out there as to whether or not that makes any sense. It does tie me down to, specific locations. I'll be sending to hostels and other places instead of post office boxes whenever possible. um, my boxes are Pretty detailed in that it's calorie dense. So I'm shipping myself about 2,500 calories per day. Now that's going to be short. I'm going to still need to find about 1,000 calories, maybe even 1,500 more per day, depending on where I am on trail in towns. So that allows me for a little bit of leeway if I do want to decide to have, wraps or tortillas or bagels and cream cheese or whatever it may be. Snickers for lunch for a week, that would be fine. Um, but it gives me a baseline. It gives me 100 plus grams of protein every day. Everything is from real foods, a lot of nuts, a lot of dried fruit. Um, I am doing some meat bars, but they're meat and veggie bars. So it's not a lot of the processed stuff. There is a challenge because when you take out the preservatives, then shelf life is an issue. So I'm having to package things really individually in this box so that they don't go bad in that way. So all the fats are separate. I'm keeping all my nuts separate from everything else. I'm keeping all of the powdered butter and those types of products away from other things. I'm kind of creating my little pantry for myself. And so I'll be able to create different meals on trail depending on what I'm in the mood for at the time. Um, but it's been intense. I have been able to purchase things in bulk and I've purchased a lot of dehydrated things as well. I'm not using a dehydrator, I'm just buying products that are already available. So I'm saving myself money, even though it's going to cost me about $17 a box to ship. Um, I'm definitely saving at least a dollar or two for every protein bar. I'm saving, $6 to $8 every meal. I am saving on, instant coffee and things like that because I can ship them to myself. So I think it'll be a wash ultimately. And I'm only doing 20 boxes. I know it's going to take me more than that, but I also want to enjoy the fun trail food too. I'm not going to be so strict that I forego the opportunity to participate in the socialization and all of that. But I do feel that a lot of people finish the trail and they're lacking in nutrients. They're not doing well, and I want to stave that off it if I can.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also the added savings that you'll have in impulse because I don't think that's accounted for. When you have a box, you're like, okay, I've got a box. But,
Yeah.
I found myself with no box approach. I'd go into towns, and of course, you're in town and you're hungry. You're constantly hungry because you're through
Yes.
hiking, and then you go into the grocery store, and everything in there looks good to your eye. And then you end up spending $100. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so would you say that as part of your nutrition, right? Because I hear a lot of people talk about how what's their approach with
Mhm.
sending food boxes. I think that's been covered. But what is there a different approach that you are taking individually as far as your nutrition concerned is concerned? For example, what do you think are some of the strengths of the nutrition you're going to be providing yourself, and what are some of the things that you are making it a point to avoid?
Um, I would say one of the strengths that I'm going to have is definitely variety. So when it comes to protein, I have several protein sources. I'm bringing um, a bar that has whey protein in it. My protein powder for my oatmeal is a plant-based protein. I will have the meat sticks that I'm bringing are a variety. So I have pork, I have beef, I have lamb. So I have a variety of that. As far as you go to a town and you buy trail mix, you're most likely getting almonds and raisins. But I've purchased cashews and walnuts and pistachios and the other bars that I like that are more of a nut and fruit bar have things like goji berries and turmeric and ginger and different flavor profiles. So I think one of the things that that's really going to be a plus is the variety that I'm getting. I'm not going to be eating, Cliff Bars for everything, which are soy protein. And so the things that I'm avoiding are the preservatives, the processed stuff, the genetically modified soy products, the high fructose corn syrup,
Seed
things like
oils.
that. See, yeah, absolutely. And the sugar. I mean, I know that gummy bears are great for trail, and a lot of people like them, Swedish fish, things like that. But instead, I'm bringing dried fruit. I just think that it packs a better punch than the candy. I'm also packing fireballs, so there's that. But I want to have the treats too.
Yeah. It sounds like you're kind of, like you said, you're prioritizing variety and you're covering the gamut, and you're getting all these nutrients, antioxidants, proteins. Those are some of the things that have kind of stood out in naming some of the
Yeah,
things that you'll be bringing. As a man who thrived off of potato chips, and I say thrived very relatively,
yeah,
I made it through my hikes. Off of these very simple carbohydrates that lacked any nutrients,
yeah.
but I definitely paid the price for it after my hikes. Even to this day, I still think I'm paying the price for some
Mm,
of the deficiencies that I had. And I think it's something that you people should really consider before starting their hike, because it's easy to say beforehand that you're willing to do the hike, or as long as you do the hike and finish the hike, you want to do it at all cost. But if you can take preventative measures, right, to
yeah.
one, in terms of your mindset, to be able to do the hike, but two, to actually thrive, right, and not just make it through, sounds like a good approach to me. So,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, being in my 50s, that's another area, right, that
mhm.
is important for nutrition. Um, I also know that, there is a tendency to either, lose a lot of weight and then gain it back when you're done. I'm hoping to stay right where I am with keeping up with the nutrition. I know what I can do on trail, how much protein I need, what I need to do for carbohydrates. I have been on trail when I've bonked because I haven't had, enough carbohydrates. One thing that I think is hard to do with a whole foods diet is I tend to get too much fiber. And if I have too much fiber and I'm trying to hike, then it can cause digestive issues. So that's something I've had to play with um, in the past couple of years on my backpacking trips is really, not going necessarily to the refined carbs, but being really careful of the fiber content that I have because that can be hard to digest.
Interesting. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But now, given everything we've just talked about as far as nutrition, what is your background? Because I guess we didn't touch that before we dove into all the details. What
So
is your background with nutrition, and kind of how did you get into this whole journey?
That's a story in itself. As I mentioned, I've always been into health and wellness and fitness. And when I was in my early 40s, I started to show signs of rheumatoid arthritis, which is prevalent in my family. It's an autoimmune disorder. And I just stumbled into some research that said food could make a difference. And so I actually was a raw vegan for about 2 years. And I don't think that's the way to go. I ended up with some major nutrition deficiencies myself, but it did definitely get rid of the inflammation that was starting to accumulate in my body. I have not had to go on any medication. I have not had any issues since then. And at the time, it sparked the interest in getting to know more. So I went through a holistic nutrition certification program and then started to work with people with autoimmune disorders, which is what I did when I lived in Connecticut. So I would have individual clients and help them understand the world of nutrition. It's one thing to go to a doctor and have them say, you're dealing sorry.
You're fine.
You're dealing with diabetes. you need to limit your sugar, but it's another thing to know how to do that. And so that's what I was. I was really a liaison between um, doctors and their clients to teach them how to bring those things into their house, whether it was to create meal plans, it was to go shopping with them to help them weed out their pantries or learn to create a few staple meals, even understanding their blood work. I did it all.
Well, didn't you know, Tara, you can't have an opinion unless you're a doctor? Don't let me go down that road.
Oh.
Oh no. Now, see, it's interesting because I don't want to get in trouble saying anything here, but you find a lot of people who are unhealthy, right? And
Yeah,
the pendulum has to swing, right? It has to go in a different direction. So they do end up going to the extreme. And I've heard a lot of similar stories of folks, you know, it's very popular in our culture now to be vegan or vegetarian and whatnot, and to demonize certain meat products. But I
yeah,
feel like the pendulum doesn't have to swing all the way in that direction. There are healthy meats. There's healthy holistic foods, and I like that word that you use, holistic foods
mhm,
that if you do a little research if you have the right people in your life to talk to about it, which obviously you've been that to many people, it's good to know because there's a lot, it seems to be a lot of things in our grocery stores that are deceiving us with labels and with advertising and marketing in ways that want to catch our eye. So it's good to be knowledgeable, and
yeah,
it'll certainly help on your hike. I wish I knew some of the things um, now that uh, or then that I know now.
yeah,
But yeah, that's wonderful. So I so obviously you found a lot of different expertise, skill sets in your life to be able to give yourself fulfillment and enrichment, but also help others. Um, and I'm sure that th- that is going to play a part into what I'm going to ask you next is how, right? Because there's different camps of people who find themselves on the trail.
mhm,
The two most popular ones are college students coming out of college, and then you've got old folks, old fogies, retired. Right? They're
yeah,
they're just this is they waited all their life to do this, and now they're doing it. You're
yeah,
53, so you're nowhere near old yet.
right
Um,
in the middle.
you're right in the middle. How are you able to find yourself in this position with this much flexibility to be able to do a through hike?
As I mentioned, it was the major life change event that landed me in a place where I had a clean slate, and I set it as a goal, and I kept that slate clean. It's meant living in limbo for 8 years and really creating a very non-typical life. And so it's not easy at 53 to make this happen for sure. And in fact, when I'm asked, why do you want to do the trail? One of my answers is why not? Why not? I'm 53 and I have this opportunity and I don't have to quit a job. I don't have to do all of these things that a lot of people would have to do to step outside of their, real life to be able to hike. I don't have that. And so I think that it makes it a little bit easier for me to do. And so I want to take this opportunity, which if I wait a year, it might not be there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I've asked you all these very specific questions about your skill sets or your background, just because I
Mhm.
want to get to that place, right? Where like, why are you hiking the trail? I found that when you ask people, why are you hiking the trail? Man, like that is such a tough question. And even when people are hiking on trail, when they finish the trail, they don't really know why exactly they did it, but it's
Mhm.
cumulative, right? It's all these different things that exist
Yeah.
in our life and our background, our psychology that bring us to the trailhead. So I guess kind of with that in mind, I know you mentioned it's the adventure, right? It's
Yeah.
why the hell not? Like I'm able to do this. What else is it that is drawing you to the trail, and do you expect to take anything from it? Is there anything that you're searching for on the trail?
I have no expectations. I do know that I can have all of these ideas and have absolutely none of them met and yet have the most fabulous time. Yeah, the adventure. I want to jump down the rabbit hole. I want to play Alice in Wonderland. I want to see what happens for sure. Why not? I have the opportunity rather than try to come up with a reason. I think the fact that I don't have a reason not to is perfect. I think it provides the best atmosphere for me to challenge myself in one of the things that I think is my weakness. Like you said, the hiker through hiker community is open arms in most ways. I mean, I'm not an I am an optimist, but I'm not necessarily naive to think that there isn't some trail drama um, waiting to happen. But I do think for the most part, it's an open arms community that will allow me to really practice these social skills that I would like to acquire. To be an inspiration, not only for my children, I want to show them that they can do hard things and that they don't have to kind of form into society's idea of what a life is. And they can go out in adventure, whatever that adventure may be. But not just my kids, for anyone that I come in contact with, I am lucky to have maintained contact with a lot of my clients and my students, and they follow me. And I want to show them too. I want them to experience things through me. When I was in Connecticut, I worked with a senior population, and a lot of those people will not have the opportunity to hike, and they're following along, and they're so excited. And so that makes me feel good to be able to do something and show people a part of the world that they wouldn't see, or a culture, or a flower, or anything, a sunrise, or a peak, all of these things that I get to share, which is wonderful. And maybe I can help along the trail too. One of the things I want to do, if I get up enough nerve to do it, is to offer impromptu yoga classes or just stretching or whatever it may be, maybe a guided meditation at a summit or something. So I can bring the things that I love to the trail as well. And then just see what happens.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned your kids, and I'm not sure how much of your family is involved or is in the know about this, but what are their thoughts on you going out and doing this?
Mhm.
I'm sure they're used to mom or aunt or whoever you are to your family going out
Yeah.
and doing things. So what's that been like for them, do you think?
Um, going from suburban Connecticut to rural Pennsylvania was really hard for my kids, especially because they were coming here into this community, small community, with a single mom that was also a yogi and didn't quite fit into the typical um, role of what they saw in their friends' parents. And so I think that they've always looked at me kind of in an outside of the box sort of way. And when they were really young, that was hard for them. But I think as they've gotten into their young adult lives, um, they're proud of me. And that feels really good um, for them to be able to say, this is my mom. And I love that. As I mentioned, my brother through hiked it, the AT in 2015. And so I'm not the first person in the family to do it. In fact, my brother and sister in law hiked it together. And so the adventure itself is not unfamiliar to my family. In fact, it's really not unfamiliar to my town. Not only did my brother and sister in law hike it, but a friend of mine from high school and her family here hiked it. I was just interviewed from the local newspaper, and the news reporter hiked it last year. She was hiked it by herself, and then recently I've received a couple of messages regarding people who are from my hometown that have either hiked it or met somebody. So the community is there, which is really interesting to me. I didn't know that it existed. So what does everyone think? I think some people think that I'm nuts. I think some people are think that it's really scary out there and couldn't imagine doing it themselves. And so I think it's all of that. Although, of course, I get excited about being that inspiration, I am not discouraged by any of the other messages that I have been aware of or received, or the energy surrounding that, because I know that it's going to be an experience that I want to have. I'm not going to say it's going to be good. In fact, I know that a large percentage won't be. In fact, even more to the point, I was sharing this um, thing that I had said about the trail being, 80% horrible and 20% great, but the 20% that was great made up for the 80% that was horrible. And he had actually hiked the trail, and I think it was 2020, maybe 2021. And he said,
Shout out to
actually,
2020.
yeah. He said, actually, it's a third, a third, a third. Um, he said a third is going to be really hard, right? Not good, uncomfortable. It's going to be a struggle. And a third is going to be fabulous, like amazing, beautiful, out of your mind. And then a third is just walking. It's just walking.
Yeah.
And I really, yeah, I can imagine that to be so.
It's very subjective. I definitely get the sense when talking to you that this isn't there's nothing that I can really tell you, right? Like you've done enough hiking yourself
Mhm.
to understand what gear do you need, what you know how most people they can't discern or understand how long a mountain mile is. So that's a big thing for people. Sometimes for some people it's literally just walking. Like I always tell people, walking on the trail, it's like it's art. It's this dance that you're doing on the trail, and you have to read each root and rock and place your foot in the right place. And for people who don't
Mm,
have those motor skills already, it's very difficult. But then you've got a brother, like you said, who's done the trail. So I'm sure you have asked him lots of questions. But like you're saying, it's a very subjective thing. If you stay away from the Facebook groups, normally it's all good.
it's
Normally
all good.
it's all good. It seems like you've got it covered. You have a realistic expectation for what's to come on the trail. And so, with that being said, I'm sure that I will see you again.
Yeah.
We talked about it beforehand. We're trying to set it up so that when you and some of the other people that I'm interviewing, to get to the halfway point or around that point, because I live near Front Royal, we can
Okay.
get together in person and talk. And so I'm doing this little experiment where I am going to show this clip, right? And me and you
Mhm.
talking right now. And I'd like you to think right now as to what you would like to say to your future self at that point
Mm,
in your hike. If you're talking to her right now, she's you got all the way up there. That's however many miles, 1,000+ miles into your journey.
mm.
What would you say?
What would I say to my future self that's halfway through? Wow. You know, I would bring in the practice of yoga and the magic of the pause. I would just ask her to pause and breathe, because it's in the pause, it's in that space that we create before we move on, before we continue, before anything happens, that we are truly present to whatever we're experiencing at the moment. And I guess I would hope that during the first part of her journey, my journey, that she would remember to pause. So not only would I ask her to pause, but then I suggest that she do so for the rest of the trip. Just to take that moment to really take it all in.
It's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great if we can all take a pause right now
Yeah.
in our lives
Yeah.
and see what's unfolded in front of us. And I guess that's the beautiful thing as well about the trail is that it does that in hyperspeed, right? It's a lot of things in life we see happen in hindsight.
Yeah.
Um, it takes a couple of years, it takes a season of life for us to look back on it and say, "Oh, well, that's where I was, and this is where I
Mhm.
am now." But
Yeah.
on the trail, you started in one place and you ended up in another, all in the course of one day, and how many miles. And I think it's a good reminder because even on trail, even when you have things unfolding in front of you so fast, sometimes we get a little caught up in trying to get to where we want to go. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. Well, Tara, I have enjoyed this interview and our time
Mm.
talking together. You have lived a very unique and diverse life, and still a lot is to unfold this hiker season. And I'm just excited to see how it unfolds for you, because I know you're going to reap all the benefits of what the trail can provide. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you again for your time. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. This has been great.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right, bye.